2. Forces that Bind. Knox paused by the door and pulled off his boots. "What's everyone stirred up about?" Amelia sat at the table with an assortment of half-pulled-apart communication equipment in front of her, wires and a soldering iron in hand. Her thick hair, a glorious crown of dark coils, spilled across her shoulders. Graceful fingers worked with quick, sure movements. "There was trouble in the lower field. And you got involved?" Warmth filled his chest even as she drilled him with a furious glare, her dark eyes flashing. "I was on my way back from the relay station. I could hardly ignore people in trouble." "This isn't your responsibility anymore, Knox." Knox bristled at her tone. "I know, Em. Wait, are you mad?" She rolled her eyes, stood, and moved to the kitchen, where she began wiping the counter with more force than was strictly necessary. He reached for her, but she tensed at his touch. He sighed and withdrew his hand. "Granites attacked a crew in the lower field, and I helped from the tree line, nothing more." "Granites? Here?" "They destroyed most of the field. The crop is a complete loss. You should see the furrows they left behind. They might be able to salvage a few sections, but I'm not sure it's worth the risk." She dropped the cloth and spun to face him. Their noses almost touched, and he couldn't resist leaning in for a kiss. She stopped him with a finger pressed to his lips. "Single granites don't attack people. How many were there?" she asked. "3, but they were massive." "From the tumult?" "No one knows, but it would make sense." He doubted many in the cluster would be eager to imagine large Earthbound migrating inland from the flat, open steppes of the tumult. There the creatures roamed unobstructed and grew to unimaginable size. Their movements kept the land constantly changing and prevented the rich plains from being settled. What would drive the beasts here? Not waiting for an answer, Amelia moved back to the table, obviously deep in thought. "They'll need ranged weapons. Long poles will be useless. An energy pulse, maybe?" She clicked her tongue. That would only enrage it. She turned to him. "You said they were attacking?" "Aggressively. Darren was half caught in a liquefaction," he said, unable to hide a faint grin. Her face paled. "That's not funny, Knox. He could have died." He waved off her concern. "The sky's power would have kept him alive long enough for us to dig him clear." "If those creatures didn't rip him end to end first. Overseers are far too cavalier about death." He shrugged and reached for her, pulling her into his arms. "Invulnerability will do that. Darren did ask if you would work on a way to keep him clear of similar sticky situations." He looked at the mess of wires and cathodes, pried loose from their shells. "I have the drive from the relay station." He pulled the small device from his pocket and tossed it into her eager hands. "Do you need to finish this first?" Amelia moved to the table and connected the drive, watching the display for a moment before sniffing and casting a disparaging look at the collection. "There's nothing to finish. I told the council the failure wasn't our equipment. Now I can tell them again." She made a broad, sweeping gesture over the tech. "It's not our equipment. The communication error isn't on our end. The signal is not getting through. Someone will need to go to Rook and talk to Dayton." It had been nearly a week with communications down to the Central Mercurial and the Order of the Sky. Here in the Reaches, where clusters were few and far between, this communication was their lifeline. Overseers could uphold the law and dispense justice, but the Order ensured stability of the region. "We should volunteer," he offered. "It would give us some time away from the cluster before you're any further along." Amelia paused, glancing down at her barely curving stomach, and pulled in a slow breath. "Some time away sounds nice." Her voice dropped, and she turned back to the counter, this time wiping slower. "When I heard the commotion, I couldn't help but worry. I was scared." "For me?" She nodded. He sighed and stepped behind her, wrapping her in his arms, and nestled his chin into her neck. "I may not have power anymore, but I'm not made of shale." He felt her cheek quirk in a half-smile. "You underestimate how dangerous life is for those without oaths." His heart skipped a beat at her hushed tone. "I swear, I am being careful. She turned to face him, lifting an incredulous eyebrow. You better be. Emilia brushed her lips across his before pulling away and moving back to the table, packing the equipment into a box. I'll design something to help, Taryn. Knox didn't miss her emphasis as he helped her gather the items from the table. Emilia apprenticed under her father, Gord, as a machinist, but her true passion lay in engineering new pieces of tech. In this, she was in a class of her own. He lifted the now full box of communication equipment. Taryn's on his own. You want this in the bedroom? Liar. She rolled her eyes. Yes, please. Knox smirked and retreated to the back bedroom, pushing open the door. Pale light filtered around the edges of thick curtains. The quiet space filled his chest with warmth. Soon this would be their child's room. He envisioned tucking a small face under the covers, curls like Emilia's spilling over the pillow. Old instincts may have been slow to die, but this room held the promise of their future, not whatever fights awaited Taryn. Steps sounded outside on the boardwalk, and the kitchen door rattled. He dropped the box in the corner and returned to the living room. Emilia looked up from the table where she sat, already sketching plans. Emilia's mother burst through the door and cast a cursory glance in their direction with an apologetic smile before she swung the door wide. Looks clear, Gord. Take it right in by the fireplace. What's this? Emilia asked, standing as Maven pushed the kitchen table back and shuffled one of the simple wooden chairs out of the way. Maven's eyes twinkled and she waved Knox over. In the doorway, carrying an irregularly shaped package wrapped in blankets, stood Gord. He was trying to maneuver the awkward object through the space when Knox jumped in on the other side. Thanks, his father-in-law huffed. Let's try to tip it on an angle. Maven herded Emilia to the far end of the room where the fireplace sat. Their home and the cluster as a whole were a mix of central technology and Reach's practicality. The cluster's generators powered lights, tech, and pumps. No one needed to haul water like those in the capital liked to joke, but they used fire to heat their homes and cook, as they always had. Put it down here. Maven motioned to the place she cleared next to the fireplace. The woman hardly looked old enough to be Emilia's mother. Her dark, textured hair was hemmed by the barest hint of silver. Bright skin gave way to gentle creases around her eyes, but on her it looked like a natural embellishment of age. Emilia stood taller than her mother, a legacy from her father, who was taller still. His broad face beamed as he unwrapped the strapped-down blankets to reveal the gift beneath. A soft gasp escaped Emilia's lips. Papa, it's beautiful. An elegant rocking chair wobbled gently before her. The richly colored wood gleamed next to the stone of the hearth. The furniture's sweeping curves whispered that they were not the only ones anticipating their child. Knox's throat felt tight. Gord was a machinist, not a woodworker, and he had clearly spent an extraordinary amount of time crafting this piece. Thank you, he said, fighting to keep the emotion from his voice. Gord put a thick hand on his shoulder. Worth every second. I even had to go talk with Searle and get some tips, which is saying something. Knox half choked on a laugh. Any time spent with Taryn's miserable father was a sacrifice worth noting. Well then, we are all the more thankful. Emilia sat down in the chair and let it roll back on its rockers, a contented smile settling across her face. We know it's been a tough season, but you're not alone, Maven said. She held her hand out to Emilia, who took it and gave it a squeeze. Knox looked away, letting them share their moment as mother and daughter. Gord clapped his back and then turned to gather the scattered blankets used to wrap the chair. As an orphan adopted by the Order, Knox continued to marvel at the security found in Emilia's family. As acolytes, he and Taryn had always been outsiders in Rickon, except with Gord and Maven. Joining their family when he married Emilia felt as natural as breathing. Have you tried the supplements I sent over with Lynn the other day? Maven asked Emilia. Emilia made a sour face. Not yet. They smelled funny. Where are they? I'll make you some now. If you add them to some pomegranate juice, it will help, but it's important. They have nutrients you and the baby need. Gord's chest rumbled with a low chuckle. You'd think you'd know better than to try to dodge your mother. Amelia sighed and moved to join her mother in the kitchen. Hazards of having a healer in the family, I suppose. Benefits, quipped Maven. A single loud thump sounded on the landing, and a knock came at the door. Come in, Knox called. The door remained motionless. Amelia let out an annoyed huff, and she shot Knox a look. Why does he insist on knocking in the middle of the day? He shrugged and pulled the door open. Terran's bulk filled the frame, his broad shoulders blocking the light. Amber eyes glinted with humor as he dipped his head and stepped through the entry, obviously having heard Amelia's complaint. I'm being polite. I wouldn't want to interrupt you and Knox having a moment. He stopped mid-sentence, noticing Amelia's parents. Maven, Gord, I didn't realize you were here. Overseer? Gord nodded in return. Not a problem. We were on our way out. Good to see you, Terran, Maven said with a hint of amusement. We'll see you two later. Be sure to drink that whole glass, Amelia. Knox held the door for Maven and Gord as Amelia returned to the large sheet of paper at the table and narrowed her eyes at Terran. You're such a child, Terran. In front of my parents, no less. Oh, Em, it's not like they don't know what's going on here. You're having their grandbaby. She leveled a glare at him. It's no excuse. Knox bit back a laugh and motioned Terran to take a seat at the table. How did it go with the council? Terran shook his head and grunted. What we expected? A hand-wringing competition. He sat as Knox poured a golden liquid into a squat glass before him. Although I can't really blame them, we have our work cut out for us. Those granites were far more aggressive than anything we've ever had to contend with before. Any idea what drew them here? Amelia asked. That was all the council debated. Food shortage, loss of territory, some long-forgotten rhythms of the beasts. He leaned back in his chair. Cursed timing for our communications to be down. Any luck on that front? I could use a line to the Order. The Order? Amelia snorted without looking up from her work. Knox and Terran shared a glance. If more Earthbound show up, we'll be thankful for the Order's help, Terran said. She continued sketching, her jaw set. We'd be better off looking after this ourselves than waiting on a bunch of grasping, ladder-climbing, self-serving bureaucrats. Between the Order of the Sky and the Ricken Council, it's a wonder the world hasn't fallen into chaos while they sit debating what fruit is or isn't holy. I am a part of that Order, Em. Terran raised his voice a step. And I am not a bureaucrat. You know that's not what she's saying, Terran, Knox interjected. Amelia looked up from her work, surprised. I didn't mean you, Terran. You and Knox are different. She flinched at the error, and her cheeks flushed. I mean, overseers are different. Silence hung over the small table for several moments. Knox reached over and squeezed Amelia's free hand. The Order could send overseers to help protect the people, even engineers to work with you on weapons and defenses. With a reluctant sigh, Amelia met his gaze, her dark eyes holding more worry than anger. Terran frowned. It's help I'm going to need sooner rather than later. The Ricken Council's grand plan is for me to destroy any and all Earthbound that threaten the cluster. Knox's brow shot up. On your own? That's ridiculous, Amelia said, her voice hardening once again. By all accounts, it was sheer dumb luck that you managed to kill the one you did. Earthbound are of the earth. Even the small ones have near impenetrable skin. Terran's mouth twitched at the dismissive comment, but he let it pass. Logan was sure to provide a detailed, if not exaggerated, account of how I defeated the beast before he carried on to the high plateau with his crew. He convinced them I could clearly do it again. Of course he did, Knox said, shaking his head. Anything to set you up for failure. Hateful bastard, Terran agreed. Amelia tapped her pencil on the paper, her forehead creased. Then we'll make sure you succeed. How do we keep you from being swallowed, Terran? Something to counter the liquefaction? Or maybe we can find a way to repel them." Terran's amber eyes flashed with interest. "Is that possible?" "I think so." She pointed towards a rough sketch she had been working on as they talked. "It'll take some time, but in theory, if we create large pulse emitters and dig a perimeter with deep probes, it could deter the creatures. All Earthbound have sensory pits to detect vibration. A properly modulated electrical pulse works to keep the small Earthbound clear from around the cluster foundations. With enough power, it should scale." "How much power?" Knox asked. "I'll have to run some numbers. We'll need several more generators at least, which will mean a supply run to Rook, unless we want to cannibalize parts from other systems and lose some infrastructure." Terran sat up straighter, looking energized. "If we have to lose a few lights to keep the cluster safe, so be it." Emilia nodded and showed him some of the finer points of her designs and what they would require. Knox watched them, his heart swelling. The two could clash in a spectacular fashion, but when push came to shove, both would move mountains to protect those under their care. They worked through rough details and a rudimentary plan for the better part of an hour before Emilia finally sat back, looking satisfied. Even so, she continued to jot down formulas, her pencil scratching numbers and functions around the schematics. Terran folded his hands behind his head with a relieved huff before falling pensive. "What?" Knox asked. "The Council wants you to go to the capital and alert the Order," he blurted. "They don't want me leaving. But I'm expendable," Knox said, sensing Emilia tensing next to him. Her expression turned stony. "You can't go back? Didn't Elevated Darius warn there would be consequences if you did?" Knox frowned. How does Emilia know what the Elevated said? He'd kept the details of that particular conversation to himself. He shot a questioning look at his friend. Terran held up his hands defensively. "I told them to send another messenger, but they insisted." "But—" His amber eyes narrowed meaningfully. "But if I can show the Ricken Council I can work with the Order, it could go a long way to getting Logan and the others off my back," Knox said. "It could." Emilia cleared her throat, drawing Knox's gaze. The rich brown of her almond-shaped eyes bored into his. "Can we stop pretending like nothing happened when you were in the capital?" "I chose a different path and renounced my vows." Knox kept his voice light, but at Terran's uncomfortable shifting, his suspicions solidified. Terran shot Emilia a pleading look. "You promised, Em." Knox groaned and tipped his head back, looking up at the rough planked ceiling. "You told her?" "You should have been the one to tell me," Emilia said, arms crossed. Knox pulled in a deep breath, missing the hum of adrenaline that used to course through his veins in such moments. He could use the sky's strength right now. He glared at Terran. "Changes within the Order happen. A new assurance here and there is to be expected. I made my choice, that's all." Terran's square jaw tightened and brows dropped. "There is nothing expected about being disavowed, Knox." Emilia stopped sketching and dropped her pencil. "And I deserve to hear the truth of it from you." Knox tried to shrug off the confession, looking between the two. "I told you, Em. A new Book of Oaths was found, new assurances uncovered. Every overseer had to choose if they would take on these new requirements or relinquish their vows." He shifted uncomfortably, letting his fingers cover a puckered scar on the back of his left hand. She didn't miss the motion, eyes narrowing. A flush of shame crawled up his neck, heating his ears. The truth cut too sharp for the soft-petaled lie to find purchase. "Terran told me you had to renounce your vows before the full conclave, and Darius stripped you of your strength in front of everyone," Emilia said, "as if you were being punished." He didn't answer, and instead took a long swig from his glass, keeping his gaze perfectly fixed on Terran. His friend at least had the decency to look at the table in shame. Given the opportunity, he wouldn't change a thing, but the cost of his choice had been high. Higher than he wanted to admit. Emilia's voice dropped low. "You said you chose to lay down your oaths. But Nox, they disowned you before the sky. That is reserved for criminals. I abandoned my vows. In their eyes, I might as well be one, Nox said. But you're not, she protested. You were a dedicated overseer. They forced you out over nothing. You still observe every assurance. Except one, he said softly, his eyes drifting to her abdomen. I laid aside my oaths because I was not willing to give up our future. Oaths and their power hold our souls. For those in the Order, there is no greater sin than an unfulfilled oath. The consequence is mine alone. I saw the Book of Oaths they recovered. I read the pages for myself. Marriage for an overseer is a grey area, but this new text makes it clear that having children of our own is forbidden. It made my choice easy. Emilia's back stiffened at his words, and she hissed, Don't. This is on them, and has nothing to do with oaths. It's about politics. Elevated Darius didn't like the influence you were gaining, so he found a way to undermine you. Her distrust of the Order sent a deep disquiet through him. How could he explain this trust that had been built over a lifetime and burned into his bones? Without a doubt, he knew this failing was his own. He'd walked away from the very oaths that had shaped him, yet for him there was no circumstance that justified abandoning Emilia or his child. The Order saw it differently, and their word was law. Oaths are the most powerful force created. The Conclave ensures this power is not corrupted. It's the very soul of their calling. Emilia scowled at him, but he pushed forward. And when deeper knowledge comes to light, it is for everyone. I could not have ignored it even if I wanted to. I don't care who's responsible, the Order, the Conclave, or the Sky herself. What they did to you was wrong. Her voice broke over the last word, and she pressed her lips tight against the building emotion. I chose the future I wanted. He held his wife's gaze, willing her to believe him, even as he ignored the cold, hollow ache within his chest where fire once burned. Emilia's shoulders softened. It's still not fair. A smile curved the edges of his mouth. I have you. It's fair enough. He moved closer to her and pulled her to his side. She rested her head on his shoulder. Terran gave him an apologetic look, and Nox returned a nearly imperceptible shrug. He'd kept the details from Emilia to spare her this very conflict. The harsh realities of the Order were difficult to understand for those raised outside of it. Oaths, by necessity, were exacting. I'll go, he said, shifting the conversation back to the matters at hand. Terran leaned back with a look of concern. You sure? There won't be a warm welcome. Nox smothered a curse, glaring at his friend, but Emilia perked up. I can go with you. Like you suggested, we can stop in Rook and speak with Dedan about the communications. If we can fix the breach, we can send the Order a message directly. If not, we can continue on. Nox's heart stuttered in his chest, the Elevated's final words echoing in his mind. Your continued breath is an insult to those who carry these vows. If I see you again, I will remedy such an affront with all speed. He shot Terran a pleading look. Emilia could not join him. Elevated Darius would be out for blood if he returned, and he would not endanger her needlessly. Terran cleared his throat and came to his rescue. Emilia, we need you here. Gord can build anything, but the cluster will be relying on your designs. Nox almost let out an audible sigh, but Emilia protested. I'll leave plans. I'm not letting Nox return to the Order alone. Lives may depend on you being here, Terran pushed. Emilia turned in her seat, holding Nox's gaze in challenge. The words lodged in his throat like dry meal, breaking free in a rush. I need to go alone. Her hopeful expression crumpled before hardening. With a shove, she pushed back from the table, gathering her paper and pencils, and stood. Apparently, I have work to do. Emilia. Nox reached for her, but she brushed past him without a backward glance. Guilt and relief mingled, and a weight lifted from his chest. Thank you, he said quietly. I shudder to think what Darius would do if we both showed up in the capital. Terran swirled his glass of golden liquid, eyes fixed on the movement. I could tell the council to send someone else. The two of you could go to Rook, wait until things quiet down. The suggestion tempted him, but his gut rebelled at the idea. Knox's eyes rested on the rocking chair near the hearth. I can't give up our home so easily. I need to do this. Terran pursed his lips, nodding. Amelia will be a bear if you leave without her. Knox sighed, taking a swallow of the sharp liquid in his cup. The familiar warmth echoed the burning power that used to push through his veins. But she will be safe. I can deal with the rest later. Terran gave a slow nod. I'm sorry I told her about the capital. Knox raised an eyebrow. You owe me for that one. How could you? Terran groaned, and the tension of the moment broke. She's relentless. As soon as she sensed you were keeping something from her, she wouldn't let up. She is a force, Knox admitted with a wry smile. It was one of the many reasons he loved her as much as he did. He lifted his drink. Here's to the forces that bind us. Terran met it with his own glass. And make us their own.